Put the key down before the police get here. Victoria Langford's voice cut across the private hotel garage with the confidence of someone who had never expected to be questioned. Simone Carter stood beside a red Ferrari, one hand resting on the open driver's door and the other holding a small leather key case. Around them, guests arriving for the Langford Motion Leadership Conference slowed beneath the bright ceiling lights. A valet stopped halfway across the polished concrete. 2 employees raised their phones. Victoria held her own phone to her ear and spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Yes, she is still here. A black woman is trying to steal a Ferrari from the executive parking level. Simone did not move. She did not lower her eyes or rush to defend herself. She simply looked at Victoria and asked, "Before you finish that call, why are you so certain this car cannot belong to me?" Victoria's expression hardened. The answer was already visible in the way she studied Simone's simple cream blouse, dark slacks, and unmarked leather bag, searching for anything that matched her idea of wealth. She found nothing she was willing to believe. What Victoria did not know was that the woman she had just accused was not only the registered owner of the Ferrari. She was also the person whose signature could determine whether Victoria still had a company to lead by the end of the day. Subscribe and stay with this story, because the police were about to verify one truth, while an entire board of directors was preparing to reveal another. Victoria ended the call and stepped closer. Her heels struck the concrete in sharp, measured beats. "The owner will be here any minute," she said. Simone glanced at the watch her father had given her years earlier. "She already is." A few people exchanged looks, but Victoria laughed as though Simone had made a desperate joke. The Ferrari gleamed beneath the garage lights, every curve reflecting red across the gray floor. It was not the newest car in the collection Simone could have afforded, nor the most expensive. It mattered because her father had restored it by hand when she was still in college. He had spent most of his life repairing luxury cars for people who rarely remembered his name. On the day he gave her the keys, he had said, "Never confuse what someone owns with what they are worth." Simone had carried those words into every boardroom that underestimated her. Now they returned as Victoria reached toward the driver's door. "Step away from the vehicle," she ordered. Simone closed the door gently before Victoria could touch it. The soft click echoed through the garage. "Do not touch my car." Victoria froze for half a second, more offended by the boundary than the accusation she had made. "Your car." "That is what I said." "Then show me the registration." Simone tilted her head. "Are you a police officer?" "I am the chief executive officer of the company hosting this event." "That was not my question." The valet lowered his gaze to hide a reaction. Victoria noticed and turned toward him. "Lock the exit gate. No vehicle leaves until the police arrive." The valet hesitated. "Ma'am, hotel security policy requires management approval." "Then call management." Simone watched the moment unfold without interrupting. She could have opened her bag, produced the registration, and ended the spectacle within seconds. Instead, she looked toward the security camera mounted above the elevator entrance, then toward the Langford Motion employees quietly recording from beside a silver sedan. For 3 months, anonymous complaints had described Victoria's behavior behind closed doors. Employees of color had reported being questioned in restricted areas where their white co-workers moved freely. Managers had described promotions blocked without explanation. Human resources files had been rewritten until patterns looked like isolated misunderstandings. Simone had come to the hotel to decide whether those reports revealed poor judgment or something deeper. Victoria had answered before the meeting even began. From the garage entrance came the low sound of approaching sirens. Blue light swept across the Ferrari's windshield. Victoria smiled with visible relief, certain authority had arrived to support her. Simone slipped the key case into her pocket and faced the entrance. "You still have time to correct this," she said. Victoria lifted her chin. "I have nothing to correct." The first police cruiser turned down the ramp, and Simone understood that the woman standing before her was not afraid of being wrong. She was afraid only of being challenged. The cruiser stopped 20 feet from the Ferrari, its blue lights washing over the concrete pillars and mirrored elevator doors. Officer Daniel Ruiz stepped out first, followed by Officer Mark Hensley. Ruiz moved with deliberate calm, taking in the open parking level, the phones raised by witnesses, the locked exit gate, and the two women standing beside the red car. Hensley looked directly at Victoria. "You made the call?" "Yes," she answered quickly. "I caught this woman trying to take a guest's Ferrari." Simone noticed how easily Victoria's certainty returned once two uniforms stood beside her. Ruiz turned toward Simone. "Ma'am, are you willing to explain what happened?" "I came downstairs to retrieve a folder from my car," Simone said. "She saw me unlock it, decided it could not belong to me, and called you." Hensley looked at the Ferrari, then at Simone's plain leather bag. "Do you have proof of ownership?" "Yes." "Then let us see it." His tone was not openly hostile, but it carried an assumption that Victoria's accusation had placed Simone under obligation. Simone opened her bag slowly and removed a slim document case. She handed Ruiz her driver's license, registration, and insurance card. Victoria crossed her arms. "Those could belong to anyone." Ruiz glanced at her. "The registration has her name. Documents can be altered." Simone looked at Victoria without expression. "You called the police before asking my name, and now my name is not enough." Ruiz examined the vehicle identification number through the windshield, then returned to the patrol car to verify the records. Hensley remained near Simone. "How long have you owned it?" 17 years. "That is a long time for a car like this." "My father restored it." Hensley studied the flawless red paint and the polished wheels. "Your father worked on Ferraris?" "He worked on whatever people brought into his shop." Simone's voice softened for the first time. 2 hours earlier, she had driven the same car through downtown streets lined with glass towers, carrying the final documents for a deal no one at Langford Motion had believed possible 6 months before. The company had been losing contracts, delaying payroll, and quietly preparing to close 2 manufacturing facilities. Meridian Equity had supplied the capital that kept more than 800 employees from receiving termination notices. Simone had led every negotiation, but her name had remained confidential while regulators reviewed the purchase. Only Ethan Cole and 3 board members knew the identity of the new controlling investor. Victoria knew merely that a private fund had acquired 51% of the company. She had spent the morning telling senior employees that the investor would remain passive and that she would continue making every important decision. Simone had arrived early because she wanted to see the company without a formal welcome. She had walked through the hotel lobby alone, listened to employees speaking when they did not know an owner was nearby, and noticed how quickly conversations became quiet whenever Victoria entered a room. At the conference registration desk, a young black employee had been questioned twice about her credentials while white guests moved past without delay. Simone had written nothing down. She had only watched. Now, standing in the garage, she realized the culture described in confidential complaints was not hidden at all. It simply depended on who was considered important enough to notice. Ruiz returned with the documents in his hand. "The vehicle is registered to Dr. Simone Carter," he said. "The insurance is current, and the identification number matches." The valet released a breath he had been holding. One employee lowered her phone. Victoria did neither. "There must be another explanation," she said. Ruiz looked at her carefully. "The explanation is that she owns the car." Simone extended her hand, and Ruiz returned the documents. "Thank you, officer." Hensley shifted his weight, his earlier suspicion replaced by discomfort. "It appears everything is in order." Simone placed the registration back inside her bag. Victoria stared at the Ferrari as though the machine itself had betrayed her. "Owning an expensive car does not mean you belong at a private corporate event," she said. The garage became quiet again. Simone closed the document case with a soft snap. "You are right," she replied. "The car has nothing to do with why I belong here." Behind Victoria, the elevator doors opened. Ethan Cole stepped out with 6 members of the Langford Motion Board, each holding a copy of the agreement Simone had come to sign. For one suspended second, no one spoke. Ethan Cole stopped just beyond the elevator threshold, the agreement held against his chest, while the board members behind him took in the police cruiser, the locked exit gate, the red Ferrari, and Simone standing beside it with her registration still in hand. Victoria recovered first. "Ethan, thank goodness," she said, turning toward him with visible relief. "There has been a serious security issue." This woman was attempting to access a vehicle and enter a private executive event. Ethan did not look at Victoria. His eyes remained on Simone. "Dr. Carter," he said, "we have been waiting for you upstairs." The words landed quietly, but their effect moved through the garage like a sudden change in pressure. One board member lowered her folder. Another glanced at Victoria, then at the employees still recording near the silver sedan. Officer Ruiz watched Simone with new understanding. Hensley looked toward the registration documents as though reading the name again in his mind. Victoria gave a small, uncertain laugh. "You know her?" Ethan's expression tightened. "Yes." "As what?" Simone slipped the document case back into her bag. "That is a question you should have asked before calling the police." Victoria's face lost color, but pride held her posture rigid. "Whatever business relationship you have with Langford Motion does not excuse the confusion surrounding the car." Ruiz stepped forward. "There is no confusion, ma'am. The vehicle belongs to Dr. Carter." "Then this is a misunderstanding," Victoria said, her voice sharpening as she searched for a safer version of events. "I was protecting company guests." Simone looked toward the locked exit gate. "By preventing one of them from leaving." Victoria ignored the question and turned to the board. "We should continue this discussion privately." Ethan opened the folder in his hands but did not remove any papers. "Privacy is one of the reasons we are in this position." The board members exchanged guarded looks. 3 months of confidential reports had described meetings where Victoria dismissed complaints as oversensitivity, promotions that disappeared after employees challenged her, and security rules enforced differently depending on who was standing at the door. Ethan had spent years explaining each incident as pressure, poor communication, or a leader struggling to save a family company. Watching Victoria now, he understood how often explanation had become permission. Simone stepped away from the Ferrari and faced the group. The blue lights continued to turn across the garage ceiling, passing over each face in measured intervals. "Officer Ruiz has confirmed the vehicle belongs to me," she said. "Before we go upstairs, I would like to understand why the chief executive officer of Langford Motion continued accusing me after the facts were clear." Victoria crossed her arms. "I did not accuse you after the facts were clear. You said owning the car did not mean I belonged at your event. This is an invitation-only conference." Simone reached into her bag and removed a black envelope embossed with the Langford Motion emblem. She held it out. Ethan took it, opened the flap, and displayed the executive credential inside. Simone's name appeared beneath the words Principal Investor Meeting. Victoria stared at it. "Someone at registration should have identified you." A young black employee at registration was questioned twice about her own credentials this morning, Simone said. No one asked the white guests ahead of her to prove they belonged. One of the board members looked down. She had received a complaint describing that exact incident less than an hour earlier. Victoria's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting this entire situation was some kind of test?" "No," Simone replied. "A test is designed. This happened naturally." The distinction left Victoria with nowhere to retreat. Ethan closed the invitation and handed it back. "The board meeting needs to begin." Victoria drew a careful breath, gathering what remained of her authority. "Fine. We can address the investors' concerns upstairs." Simone did not move. "Before we do, unlock the gate." Victoria glanced toward the valet. "Open it." The valet pressed the control. Metal gears hummed overhead as the barrier lifted. The sound was ordinary, but several employees watched as though something larger had just opened. Ruiz returned Simone's final document and stepped back. "You are free to go, Dr. Carter." "Thank you." Simone turned toward the elevator rather than the Ferrari. Victoria followed beside Ethan, still convinced she could restore control once the doors closed. As the group approached, Naomi Brooks emerged from the second elevator carrying a sealed portfolio stamped with Meridian Equity's mark. She walked directly to Simone and said, "The final ownership transfer has cleared. 51% is now officially registered." Ethan stopped. The board members turned. Victoria looked from the portfolio to Simone, and for the first time that afternoon, she understood that the woman she had tried to remove from the garage was about to enter the building as the person who owned the controlling share of everything upstairs. The elevator doors opened onto the 27th floor, where glass walls overlooked the city and a long conference table waited beneath recessed lights. Simone entered first, followed by Naomi, Ethan, the board members, and Victoria. No one spoke until the doors closed behind them. The silence felt different from the garage. Downstairs, Victoria had relied on volume, urgency, and the presence of police. Upstairs, every person in the room understood exactly how much authority had changed hands. Naomi placed the sealed Meridian equity portfolio at the head of the table. Simone did not sit there. Instead, she chose a chair halfway down, leaving the most powerful seat empty. Victoria noticed. "If this is meant to humiliate me," she said, "I would prefer that we address it directly." Simone removed her watch and set it beside the portfolio. "You called the police on me because you believed I was stealing my own car. You continued after the registration was confirmed. You questioned whether I belonged at an event where I was the principal investor. Nothing I do in this room could embarrass you more than the choices you made downstairs." Ethan lowered his eyes. One board member shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Victoria remained standing. "I made a security decision under pressure." "There was no pressure until you created it," Simone replied. "You saw a black woman beside an expensive vehicle and treated suspicion as evidence." Victoria looked toward the board. "Are we really going to reduce a complicated situation to race?" Naomi opened the portfolio. The first document was not the ownership agreement. It was a summary of 43 internal complaints filed over 3 years. Each page listed dates, departments, and repeated concerns about unequal treatment. Simone slid the report across the table. Race was already part of the situation. You simply assumed no one with power would say it aloud. Victoria did not touch the report. "Anonymous complaints are not proof." "Some were anonymous because employees feared retaliation," Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but the room turned toward him. "We received resignation letters, exit interviews, and written requests for review. I told myself the company was under unusual stress. I treated each case as separate." He looked at Simone. "That was a mistake." Victoria stared at him as though betrayal had entered through the only person she expected to defend her. "You approved every major decision I made." "I approved decisions," Ethan replied. "I did not approve a culture where people learned that speaking honestly could cost them their careers." Simone opened a second folder. Inside were salary comparisons, promotion histories, and security incident reports. The patterns were not dramatic when viewed one at a time. Together, they formed something impossible to dismiss. Black employees were questioned more often in executive spaces. Complaints involving senior managers disappeared into informal review. Promotions repeatedly went to less experienced candidates after employees challenged leadership. Victoria finally sat down. "What exactly do you want?" Simone looked at her for a long moment. "I wanted to know whether the company needed new capital or new character." The city lights began appearing beyond the windows as evening settled over the buildings. Victoria folded her hands tightly. "You already purchased control. So this meeting is theater." "No," Simone said. "The purchase saved 800 jobs. This meeting determines whether the leadership that endangered those jobs deserves to remain." Naomi removed the final document and placed it before Simone. It was the completed transfer agreement confirming Meridian Equity's 51% ownership. Beneath it rested a second document marked Independent Ethics Review Authorization. Victoria saw both. "You planned this before today." "I planned an investigation before today," Simone said. "You decided what evidence would begin it." Victoria's confidence flickered, then returned in a smaller, more desperate form. "I apologize for the misunderstanding in the garage." Simone's expression did not change. "What are you apologizing for?" "For not recognizing who you were." The answer settled across the table with perfect clarity. Simone leaned back slightly. "That is the problem, Victoria. You still believe respect depends on recognizing someone's importance." Outside the glass wall, employees gathered quietly near the reception area, waiting to learn why police lights had appeared below and why the board had abandoned the conference. Simone turned the ethics authorization toward the directors. "This review will begin tonight. Every employee will be allowed to speak without reporting through Victoria's office. All records will be preserved. No one will be punished for participating. Victoria looked from face to face, searching for resistance. She found none. And my position, she asked. Simone picked up a pen but did not sign yet. That depends on whether today was your worst decision or simply the first one made in front of witnesses. Simone signed the authorization with one measured stroke, and the room seemed to exhale around her. Naomi collected the document, dated it, and placed it inside the sealed portfolio. The review begins immediately, Simone said. Until it is complete, Victoria will step away from all personnel decisions, security matters, and access to employee records. Victoria's chair moved slightly against the floor. You are suspending me based on one incident. No, Simone replied. I am limiting your authority because one incident confirmed a pattern that 43 employees were already afraid to describe openly. Ethan opened the conference room door. Beyond the glass, department leaders and staff members stood in uncertain groups, their conference badges catching the pale light. Some looked toward Victoria. Most looked away. Simone rose and walked into the reception area without an announcement. The conversation stopped. She could feel the same attention that had followed her in the garage, but the atmosphere had changed. Downstairs, strangers had watched to see whether she could prove she belonged. Upstairs, employees were waiting to see what she would do now that no one could deny her authority. A young black woman stood near the registration desk holding a tablet against her chest. Simone recognized her as the employee who had been questioned twice that morning. Her badge read Maya Ellis, Operations Associate. Were you asked to verify your credentials more than once today? Simone asked. Maya glanced toward Victoria through the conference room glass. Yes, ma'am. Were other guests asked? Maya hesitated. Not that I saw. Victoria stepped into the reception area. This is not the place for an interrogation. Simone turned toward her. You are right. It is the place where it happened. Maya's grip tightened around the tablet. I reported similar treatment last year, she said quietly. Human Resources told me the manager was being cautious. Another employee moved closer, an older Latino man from manufacturing. My promotion review disappeared after I questioned a safety budget, he said. A white woman from accounting lifted her hand slightly. I was told not to document comments made during executive meetings because it would create unnecessary conflict. The room did not erupt. No one shouted. One voice simply made room for another. Naomi began recording names and contact information while explaining that every interview would be confidential and independently supervised. Ethan listened with his hands at his sides, no longer trying to defend decisions that had become indefensible. Victoria stood near the glass wall, surrounded by people she had managed for years but apparently never known. This is becoming a public spectacle, she said. Simone looked around the quiet room. No. A spectacle is what happened in the garage. This is accountability. Victoria's face tightened. You cannot rebuild a company by encouraging everyone to complain. I am not encouraging complaints. I am removing the fear that kept facts hidden. Officer Ruiz appeared near the elevator with Hensley beside him. They had returned because hotel management needed a formal statement about the locked gate. Ruiz approached Simone. The security video confirms your account. The hotel has preserved the recording. Victoria looked toward him. The matter was resolved. Ruiz answered carefully. The vehicle issue was resolved. The report still has to document why emergency services were called. Hensley remained quiet, his earlier assumptions visible in the way he avoided Simone's eyes. Then he stepped forward. Dr. Carter, I should have addressed you more neutrally when I arrived. I accepted the caller's version before reviewing the evidence. Simone studied him. What will you do differently next time? Hensley looked toward Maya, then back at Simone. Ask for facts before deciding who looks believable. It was not a perfect apology, but it was the first one that understood the mistake. Simone nodded once. Across the room, Victoria watched the exchange and seemed to realize that everyone except her had begun moving toward responsibility. She returned to the conference table and opened the complaint summary. For the first time, she read past the first page. The names were hidden, but the experiences were specific. A security badge deactivated without explanation. A promotion withdrawn after. A disagreement. A woman escorted from an executive floor while her white colleague walked through unchecked. Victoria reached the final page and found a statement underlined in blue ink: "People here do not fear making mistakes. They fear being seen by the wrong person while making none." Her hands became still. Behind her, Simone stood at the window as city lights reflected across the glass. The Ferrari remained 27 floors below, silent beneath the garage lights. It had never been the evidence that mattered most. The real evidence was now standing throughout the building, finally speaking in voices Victoria could no longer dismiss. Victoria remained alone at the conference table long after the employees had been escorted to private interview rooms. The complaint summary lay open before her, its pages arranged beneath the cold white lights. She had spent years believing leadership meant keeping control of every room, every message, every version of events. Now the building moved without her. Naomi coordinated the independent reviewers. Ethan contacted department heads. Simone met with employees one by one, listening without interrupting and asking only for dates, witnesses, and records. No one requested Victoria's approval. Through the glass wall, she watched Maya Ellis enter a smaller meeting room carrying the same tablet she had held against her chest. The young woman paused before closing the door, looked toward Victoria, and then turned away. That small movement unsettled Victoria more than anger would have. She remembered seeing Maya at registration that morning. She had noticed the badge, the nervous posture, and the hesitation in her voice. She had not noticed the person. Near midnight, Simone returned to the conference room. She carried 2 paper cups of coffee and placed one across from Victoria. Victoria looked at it but did not reach for it. "Is this kindness supposed to make your decision easier?" she asked. Simone sat down. "It is coffee. Nothing more." Outside the windows, traffic moved far below like thin streams of light. The city appeared quiet from 27 floors up, though both women knew how much could happen beneath a polished surface. Victoria closed the complaint file. "You have already decided I am guilty." "This is not a courtroom," Simone said. "The review will determine what happened and who was responsible. And if it confirms everything, then responsibility will have consequences." Victoria looked toward the empty seat at the head of the table. "My father built this company." "Your father founded it," Simone replied. 800 employees built it every day after that. The distinction landed without force, but it remained between them. Victoria finally wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "Do you know what it was like taking over after he died? Every investor expected me to fail. Every competitor waited for 1 weak quarter. I learned that hesitation was expensive." Simone studied her. "Pressure explains why people become hard. It does not excuse who they choose to become hard toward." Victoria's eyes moved to the window. "When I saw you at the car, I thought I was protecting something." "What?" "The event. The company. The people who belonged there." Her voice weakened on the final words. Simone leaned back. "And what told you I did not belong?" Victoria did not answer. The garage returned to her in fragments: Simone's cream blouse, the plain leather bag, the confidence she had interpreted as deception, and the skin color she had noticed before anything else. She had searched for evidence only after reaching a conclusion. "I was wrong," Victoria said. "You were," Simone replied. "But the review is not about whether you can say those 3 words tonight. It is about whether this company can become safe for people who were never allowed to say them to you." The room fell silent. Simone did not offer forgiveness, and Victoria did not ask for it. A soft knock came at the door. Naomi entered with an initial evidence log. 43 complaints had become 51 after employees learned they could speak independently. Several involved Victoria directly. Others involved managers who had copied her behavior because they believed it was the price of advancement. Naomi placed the report before Simone. "There is enough to recommend immediate administrative leave." Victoria closed her eyes. Simone signed the temporary order and turned it toward her. "Effective tonight, you are relieved of executive duties pending the final findings." Victoria read the page slowly. Her title remained printed beneath her name, but it already looked like something from the past. She removed her company access card and placed it on the table. "Will I be allowed to respond?" "Fully," Simone said. Accountability without fairness would only repeat the same mistake. Victoria stood, gathered her coat, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped beside the glass wall where employees were still giving statements under warm lamps. "I thought authority meant never letting people see uncertainty," she said. Simone looked at her reflection in the window. Real authority begins when uncertainty makes you seek the truth instead of inventing it. Victoria nodded once and entered the hallway alone. The elevator doors closed around her without ceremony. Simone remained by the window as dawn began to lighten the eastern edge of the city. Far below, the red Ferrari waited in the garage, exactly where it had been all evening. Nothing about the car had changed. Only the people who believed they could decide who deserved to stand beside it. 6 weeks later, the Independent Review returned in 3 sealed volumes. Simone arrived at Langford Motion before sunrise and found Ethan already waiting outside the boardroom. The building was quiet, its glass corridors reflecting the first gray light of morning. Naomi placed the reports across the conference table and opened the executive summary. 51 employees had provided statements. 27 described unequal treatment connected to race, background, or perceived social status. 9 managers admitted that they had ignored concerns because they feared losing access to Victoria. Security records showed repeated badge checks involving employees of color in areas where white colleagues entered without question. Promotion files revealed qualifications rewritten after decisions had already been made. The pattern did not depend on one afternoon in a parking garage. That afternoon had only made the pattern impossible to hide. Board members entered one by one, carrying coffee and expressions stripped of ceremony. Victoria arrived last. She wore a dark suit and no company badge. Her administrative leave had changed the way she moved through the building. She no longer expected doors to open before she reached them. Simone waited until everyone was seated. "The review is complete," she said. "Today is not about protecting the company's image. It is about deciding whether the company deserves a future." Naomi presented the findings without exaggeration. Every conclusion was tied to records, interviews, or documented decisions. Victoria listened without interrupting. When Naomi finished, the room remained silent. Ethan placed both hands on the table. "I supported this system by explaining away what I should have questioned," he said. "I am submitting my resignation as Chief Financial Officer." Simone looked at him. "The review found failures in your judgment, but it also found that you preserved records and cooperated fully. That does not erase what I ignored." "No," Simone replied. "But accountability is not always departure. Sometimes it is staying long enough to repair what you helped damage." Ethan lowered his eyes. The board voted to retain him under independent oversight and remove his authority over employee complaints. Then all attention turned to Victoria. The chair of the board read the recommendation: permanent removal as chief executive officer, termination of all supervisory authority, and suspension from the board for 1 year. Victoria folded her hands. "I understand," she said. One director asked whether she wished to challenge the findings. "I could challenge the wording," Victoria answered. "I could argue over intent. But intent became the shield I used whenever consequences reached me." She looked across the table at Simone. "I apologized because I did not know who you were. I see now that I was still defending the belief that some people deserve respect only after proving their importance." Simone did not soften the truth for her. "Understanding the harm does not remove it." "I know." Victoria opened a folder she had brought with her. Inside was a written statement accepting the findings, waiving a private settlement clause, and allowing employees to discuss their experiences publicly without fear of legal retaliation. Naomi read the first page, then looked at Simone. "This goes beyond what the review required." Victoria nodded. "Silence protected me. I should not profit from it now." The board approved her removal. There was no applause and no satisfaction in the room, only the quiet weight of a decision that had arrived years too late. After the meeting, Simone walked through the manufacturing division with Maya Ellis. Employees no longer stopped speaking when an executive approached. New reporting channels had been placed outside management control. Security badge policies applied equally to every employee and visitor. Maya had been promoted to lead the accountability office, not as a reward for being mistreated, but because her record showed she had been qualified long before anyone was willing to see it. Near the main entrance, workers removed Victoria's portrait from the leadership wall. Simone paused but did not watch them finish. "Will you put yours there?" Maya asked. Simone looked at the empty space. "No. Put the employee charter there." That afternoon, the charter replaced the portrait. Its first line was simple: dignity is not a benefit granted by rank. Across town, Victoria sat alone in a public accountability workshop, listening as strangers described the cost of being judged before they were known. For the first time, she did not explain herself. She took notes. 3 months after the board's decision, Langford Motion held its first employee assembly under the new charter. The gathering took place on the factory floor instead of in a hotel ballroom. Folding chairs filled the open space between assembly lines, and morning light entered through high windows above the steel beams. Simone stood near the front without a stage, a spotlight, or a reserved table. Maya Ellis sat beside representatives from manufacturing, finance, security, and human resources. Ethan remained several rows back, taking notes instead of directing the room. The changes had begun slowly. Every promotion now required a written explanation tied to measurable qualifications. Security checks were recorded and reviewed for consistency. Complaints went directly to Maya's independent office, where no executive could erase, delay, or quietly redefine them. Some managers welcomed the new rules. Others resigned when they realized influence would no longer protect poor decisions. Simone considered both outcomes useful. When the assembly began, she spoke for less than 5 minutes. "A policy cannot create dignity," she said. "It can only stop power from denying it. The rest depends on what each of us chooses when no one important appears to be watching." Then she stepped aside and let employees speak. A technician described being promoted after 4 years of overlooked evaluations. A security guard admitted that he had enforced unequal rules because supervisors rewarded obedience. A department manager explained how fear had shaped her silence. No one was praised for telling the truth. No one was punished for arriving at it late. The purpose was not performance. It was repair. Near the final row sat Victoria. Her 1-year board suspension had not ended, and she had no authority in the building. She had requested permission to attend as a listener, agreeing that she would not speak unless invited. Some employees objected. Simone understood why. Accountability did not require those who had been harmed to provide comfort to the person responsible. Victoria took a seat near the exit and kept her notebook closed on her lap. When Maya noticed her, the room tightened. Simone looked toward Maya, leaving the decision with her. Maya stood. "You may stay," she said. "But listening is not the same as being forgiven." Victoria nodded. "I understand." The meeting continued. An older black engineer named Robert Gaines approached the microphone. He had worked at Langford Motion for 19 years and had been passed over for senior leadership 4 times. "I used to think the company did not see me," he said. "That was easier to accept than realizing it saw me clearly and still decided I was worth less." Victoria lowered her eyes. Robert did not look at her. He addressed the employees. "What matters now is whether we build something different enough that the next person never has to become invisible just to survive here." When he finished, the room remained silent for several seconds before Maya thanked him. There was no applause. His words deserved more than a reflex. After the assembly, Victoria waited near the empty chairs until most employees had left. Simone approached her. "You listened," Simone said. "It was harder than defending myself," Victoria replied. "Defense always gave me somewhere to hide." She opened her notebook. Every page was filled. "I cannot undo what I built into this company." "No," Simone said. "But you can decide whether your regret becomes another way to center yourself." Victoria closed the notebook. What would responsibility look like now? Simone glanced toward Robert, who was speaking with 2 young engineers near the assembly line. Ask the people affected what repair requires. Then accept that they may not want anything from you. Victoria nodded, this time without searching for approval. Later that afternoon, Simone walked alone through the parking garage. The Ferrari waited beneath the same white lights where the accusation had begun. She rested her hand on the roof and remembered her father bent over its engine, teaching her that value was not created by a badge, a title, or a price. Behind her, footsteps approached. Maya held a proposal for a technical training center designed for students from underfunded neighborhoods. At the top of the first page was a suggested name, the Carter Automotive Institute. Simone read it twice. Use my father's full name, she said. He built the part of this story that mattered long before anyone knew mine. 11 months later, the Daniel Carter Automotive Institute opened its doors on the east side of the city, inside a renovated brick building that had once housed an abandoned warehouse. Morning sunlight poured through tall windows onto workbenches, diagnostic equipment, and rows of polished tools. Students from public high schools gathered beneath a simple metal sign bearing the name of Simone's father. No luxury logo appeared beside it. No executive portrait hung in the lobby. The first class would teach engine systems, electric vehicle technology, and business fundamentals to young people who had rarely been invited into rooms where expensive machines were designed, owned, or admired. Simone stood near the entrance wearing the same watch her father had given her. Maya Ellis welcomed families and handed each student a set of safety glasses. Robert Gaines had accepted the position of technical director, finally receiving the leadership role his experience had earned years earlier. Ethan attended without speaking, carrying a folder that confirmed Langford Motion would fund the institute for 10 years without controlling admissions or curriculum. Near the back of the room stood Victoria. Her suspension had ended, but she had not returned to the board. She had declined an offer to regain a ceremonial position and instead continued attending accountability programs outside the company. She remained apart from the employees and families, understanding that her presence did not entitle her to attention. When Simone noticed her, their eyes met briefly. Victoria offered no rehearsed apology. She simply nodded toward the students and said, "This is what the company should have been building all along." Simone looked across the room. "Then help make sure other companies learn sooner." Victoria accepted the words without mistaking them for forgiveness. Outside, the restored red Ferrari waited beneath the clear afternoon sky. The same car that had once become the center of suspicion now stood beside the institute entrance as part of a student exhibition. A 17-year-old black student named Tiana Parker approached it with careful excitement. She had earned the institute's first scholarship after designing a low-cost battery cooling system in her school science lab. Simone placed the keys in Tiana's hand. "Drive it into the exhibition bay," she said. Tiana looked from the keys to the car. "Are you sure?" Simone smiled. "My father believed machines should open doors, not become reasons to close them." Tiana entered the driver's seat while her classmates guided her slowly toward the glass doors. No one questioned whether she belonged behind the wheel. No one demanded that she prove the car was hers before treating her with respect. The doors opened, and the Ferrari rolled into the building beneath her steady hands. Families watched in silence as sunlight moved across the red paint and reached the name Daniel Carter above the workshop floor. Simone felt no triumph over Victoria. Real justice had never been about replacing one powerful woman with another. It was about changing the rules that allowed dignity to depend on appearance, wealth, or recognition. The company had survived. Employees could speak without fear. Leadership no longer belonged only to those who resembled the people already in charge. Victoria had lost her position, but she had also stopped protecting the version of herself that caused the harm. Kindness had not erased accountability, and accountability had not required cruelty. As the first class gathered around Robert's workbench, Simone placed her father's old shop rag inside a glass case near the entrance. The fabric was faded and permanently marked by years of honest work. Beneath it, a small plaque carried his favorite lesson: never confuse what someone owns with what they are worth. Simone stepped back as the students entered the workshop. The tools began to move. Questions filled the room. Outside, the parking space where the Ferrari had stood was empty, but the door it helped open remained wide. And if you had witnessed what happened in that garage, would you have challenged the accusation before learning who Simone was, or would her title have been the first thing that made you believe her?